Imagine waking up one morning and your entire city is gone. Not destroyed by war, not buried by a volcano, just empty. The market's abandoned, the palace is silent. Streets that once held millions of people now hold nothing but dust and wind. This didn't happen once. It happened over and over again, to some of the most powerful civilizations ever built. And here's what nobody tells you. Historians blamed war for centuries, but modern science is now pointing to something else entirely. Something that connects the Akkadian Empire, the Bronze Age, the Maya, and even Rome, in a way that will genuinely unsettle you. I'm going to show you 4 civilizations, and by the end, you're going to see a pattern so clear, so obvious in hindsight, that you'll wonder why nobody talks about it. But I also need to warn you, the last 2 minutes of this video hit different, because this pattern, it didn't stop in ancient history. This is the real reason ancient civilizations suddenly disappeared. Let's start around 2200 BCE, the Akkadian Empire, the world's first true empire, millions of people, trade routes stretching hundreds of miles, a writing system, a standing army, a functioning government. By every measure, these people had it figured out. And then, within a single generation, it was over. Their own texts describe it. The great agricultural plains return to desert. No one treads the highways. The fields produce no grain. For decades, historians assumed invasion, internal rebellion, a weak king, standard explanations. Then, in the 1990s, scientists started drilling core samples from the seafloor near Oman, right next to ancient Akkadian territory, and what they pulled up changed the entire conversation. A massive, sudden drought, starting exactly around 2200 BCE, lasting 300 years. Not a bad season, not a rough decade. 300 years of almost no rain. Crops died, animals died. Hundreds of thousands of people fled south, overwhelming every city still standing. The infrastructure buckled, and the empire dissolved, not from invasion, because the rain stopped. If this happened to the Akkadians, the world's first empire, could it happen again to multiple civilizations at the same time, about 1,000 years later? It did. And what happened next is so strange that historians spent decades refusing to believe it. Around 1200 BCE, something extraordinary happened. Something that, even today, historians call one of the most puzzling events in all of human history. In roughly 50 years, which is nothing, historically, nearly every major civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean collapsed. At the same time, the Mycenaean Greeks, gone. The Hittite Empire, which had stood for 500 years, destroyed overnight. The Ugaritic city-states abandoned so fast that archaeologists found unbaked bread still in their ovens. Even Egypt, the mightiest force on earth, nearly didn't survive. For a long time, the go-to explanation was the Sea Peoples, mysterious maritime invaders who supposedly swept in and burned everything down. And look, the Sea Peoples were real. There's evidence of raids. But here's the problem. A group of raiders does not simultaneously destroy a dozen independent civilizations spread across hundreds of miles of sea and land. That's not how raids work. That's a system failure. New research points to a perfect storm. Climate data shows a severe, prolonged drought starting right around 1200 BCE across the entire Eastern Mediterranean. But the drought alone isn't the whole story. Bronze Age civilizations were deeply, almost fatally interdependent. Cyprus supplied copper, the Levant supplied tin, Egypt supplied grain. Pull one thread, and the entire web unravels. Add geological evidence of earthquakes, add famine. Add the internal revolts that always follow when people are starving, and then add the Sea Peoples on top of all that. The Sea Peoples didn't cause the collapse. They moved into the vacuum it left behind. There's a difference. What actually brought down the Bronze Age was a cascade, every stress hitting a system that had no slack left to absorb any of it. Still think this is coincidence? Let's cross the ocean, because the exact same thing happened, in a jungle, 800 years later. Around 800 to 900 CE, the classic Maya civilization was at the absolute peak of its power. Millions of people, stone pyramids taller than some modern buildings, a mathematical system advanced enough to calculate astronomical cycles centuries into the future, cities that would have looked to a European of the same era like something out of a dream. And then, one by one, the cities went dark, not all at once. Over roughly a century, city after city was abandoned. The population of the southern Maya lowlands dropped by an estimated 50 to 90%. Just to feel the scale of that, imagine 9 out of every 10 people in your country simply gone within 100 years. Historians first blame warfare between rival city-states, which, yes, there was war. But cities that survive wars get rebuilt. These weren't rebuilt, they were reclaimed by jungle. Lake sediment cores from the Yucatan show severe repeated droughts happening precisely during the collapse period. But here's what makes the Maya story especially haunting. They may have helped cause their own drought. For centuries, the Maya had been clearing forests at an enormous scale for farmland, for the fuel needed to burn the lime plaster on their monuments. Less forest means less moisture in the atmosphere. Less moisture means less rain. The land was slowly, quietly drying itself out. They built a civilization so large, so hungry, and so technically sophisticated that it dismantled the climate system, keeping it alive. And by the time anyone could see what was happening, it was already too late to stop it. You're probably starting to see it, but let's add one more. The one everyone thinks they already know? Rome. You already know Rome fell. The version you were taught goes something like this. The empire got lazy, the barbarians got strong, and in 476 CE, it was over. That story is not wrong, exactly. It's just missing about 600 years of context. From roughly 250 BCE to 250 CE, Rome enjoyed what scientists called the Roman climate optimum. Centuries of warm, stable, predictable weather. Agriculture boomed. The population grew. The empire expanded. Everything was working. Then around 250 CE, right at Rome's height of territorial power, the climate shifted. Temperatures dropped. Rainfall became erratic. Harvests started failing. And almost simultaneously, the Antonine Plague and then the Plague of Cyprian tore through the population. Tens of millions dead over a few generations. Sound familiar? Historian Kyle Harper argues that climate change and pandemic disease were the primary engines of Rome's fall, not military defeat. The barbarians didn't destroy a thriving empire. They walked into one already hollowed out by climate stress, disease, economic collapse, and political dysfunction. Rome wasn't conquered. It was already collapsing. The barbarians just got there at the right moment. 4 civilizations, 4 different continents, 4 completely different time periods, cultures, and technologies, and one thread running through all of them. I've been hinting at it since the beginning. Now let's actually name it. The real reason ancient civilizations collapsed isn't one thing. It's a specific kind of system failure, and it follows the same sequence every time. Researchers like Joseph Tainer, who wrote the defining academic work on societal collapse, argued that advanced civilizations are inherently fragile, not because of their weaknesses, because of their strengths. Think about this carefully. A village of 50 people can absorb a drought. They tighten their belts, they move, they adapt. But a civilization of 10 million, with armies to feed, trade debts to repay, bureaucracies to maintain, cities that need constant grain deliveries just to function, has almost zero flexibility. When the margin disappears, everything fails at once. The pattern across every civilization we looked at goes like this. Step 1, a prolonged environmental stressor, almost always drought or climate instability. Step 2, food insecurity and economic strain. Cracks form in the foundation. Step 3, social unrest, mass migration, disease. The cracks widen. Step 4, the complexity of the civilization becomes its death trap. Too interconnected to absorb shocks, too rigid to adapt fast enough. Step 5, collapse, and silence. This isn't a theory someone invented. This is a convergent finding from ice cores, lake sediments, tree ring data, archaeological excavations, and genetic population studies. The science, from multiple independent fields, is pointing at the same conclusion. Civilizations don't get murdered. They get stressed beyond their capacity to cope. And then something, a final drought, a final plague, a final raid, delivers the blow that ends a patient that was already dying. And now I need you to sit with something uncomfortable for just 2 more minutes. Every civilization we talked about today believed they were permanent. The Akkadians built administrative systems for a future they assumed would always exist. The Maya built pyramids to outlast time. Rome wrote laws for the next 1,000 years. None of them knew they were living in the final chapter. Now, we are the most complex civilization in human history. Global supply chains connecting billions of interdependent actors. Financial systems so interwoven that a bank failure on one continent crashes economies on another. 8 billion people dependent on agricultural output that is, right now, being tested by the same climate instability that brought down the Akkadians and the Maya. We are more powerful than any civilization that has ever existed. We are also more complex. And if Tainter is right, if complexity itself is the vulnerability, then we have never, in the entire history of human civilization, been more exposed to the pattern we just spent the last 14 minutes studying. I'm not here to tell you it's all falling apart. The Maya who abandoned their cities didn't vanish. Their descendants are alive today. Rome fell, but something rose from its ashes. Collapse isn't the end of humans. It's the end of a particular way of organizing ourselves. But what history is absolutely screaming at us, if we're willing to actually listen, is that the warning signs are always visible before the fall. The stretched resources, the political dysfunction, the climate stress, the over-leveraged complexity, they are never invisible. They are just ignored. The question has never been whether civilizations can collapse. History already answered that question definitively multiple times. The only question left is whether we're paying attention. If this made you think, and honestly, if you're still here, it clearly did, subscribe. We're going to keep pulling on threads like this. The questions history forgot to answer. The patterns hiding in plain sight. I'll see you in the next one.